Thank you. Mr. Frank's recognized for 7
Such
minutes. 50.
time as I may consume. I don't know if a couple of my other members may come. I have to confess, Mr. Chairman, my mind wandered for a bit when I was here. I was thinking of something else. And as I listened to my friend from Texas, I thought for a minute we were talking about the Pentagon when we were talking about not rewarding inefficiency with more money. And I got momentarily encouraged that maybe we would begin to think about spending constraints there. But alas, I came back to this hearing. And the answer is, yes, you do want to make people be more efficient, but you don't penalize the American public further because agencies that were supposed to be protecting them didn't do the job well enough. And yes, it's important to get more efficient, but no, that is not, in this case, a substitute for funding when you are significantly increasing resources. It's also the case that some of the inefficiencies resulted not, or some of the poor results, resulted from ideological differences, from policy differences. The Boston Consulting Group, and I very much, Mr. Chairman, by the way, and I appreciated what you said about the hearing, and I think the witness list is a good one for this reason, and I appreciated your comments that I think we should be trying to do both, which is to improve efficiency and deal with funding. But let me just read from a couple of things from the Boston Consulting Group's report. Despite the material increases in responsibility driven by Dodd-Frank and the concomitant increase in workload, the SEC's resources have not grown in proportion. Next, and this is very important, on page 69 of the report. While the SEC's funding has grown over the decade, in recent years the growth has not kept pace with the SEC's expanded role. Consequently, while the agency can certainly use its resources more efficiently, it still faces a resource disconnect, i.e., with the greatest efficiency in the world, they wouldn't have the money to do what they are supposed to do. And then on page 147, while assessing which activities the SEC should undertake is beyond the scope of BCG studies, senior management itself has identified several high-priority regulatory activities they cannot implement today, even with the efficiencies described above. They cannot implement today, even with the efficiencies described above, including the agency's demand for technology and expertise. You can't efficient your way into modern technology and to getting the kind of personnel that you need. And by the way, the BCG said, look, you're never going to have all the money in the world. Prioritize your activities. So this is a reference to what would happen if they did do the prioritization. This is not saying do everything. This says after prioritization, and here's what the BCG says, not the SEC, the Boston Consulting Group. Based upon a very preliminary estimate, a range of an incremental $200 to $300 million may be required for the initiatives described in Choice 1. And finally, one of the options that some people have said they might do if they don't get the money is, in the event that this is on page 150, in the event that the funding environment does not change, an alternative option is the SEC's role to be changed to fit the budget. The SEC would then need to rethink what activities it should perform and delegate greater, it should then need to rethink what activities it should perform and delegate greater authority to SROs. The new SEC would change from being an actor that actively regulates markets and market participants to an overseer that primarily monitors the regulatory actions of others to whom it has delegated regulatory activities. And let me just ask, in terms of time, is that based on 5 or?
The gentleman can have another minute.
Yeah, 3 more. Yeah, I'll take all of my.
Oh, I think, what, did you just start at 5 instead of 7?
Oh, I'm sorry. What is here?
Okay.
Right, I'll just finish with this. I'll just take 1 more minute.
He had 7 and minutes and 15 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is one major additional responsibility that I believe is very important. That's the shared responsibility with the Commodities Futures Trading Commission over derivative regulation. Among the mistakes that were made by Congress and the President earlier, around 2000, when derivatives were exempted from regulation, when the swap market grew up. So the swap market grew up in an area, in fact, it's not even correct to call it deregulation. It is non-regulation of a very important activity. We have given the SEC, along with the CFTC, the responsibility to regulate derivatives. We are talking about AIG, where you're talking about interchanges between financial institutions, not so much end users. The notion that they could take on that added responsibility, this very complicated one, we want it done right, and derivatives is a complicated business, and we don't want to impinge on end users. To do that without a significant increase in funding is clearly impossible. So I welcome the Boston Consulting Group, and they argue that we may have been overly prescriptive in the legislation last year, and I'm open to that. And I think that's one of the things we may be able to agree on, Mr. Chairman, about giving them more flexibility within a context of assuring these things. But let's be very clear. We have a major new grant of responsibility in derivatives. And the notion that that can be done without a significant increase in funding is greatly flawed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll reserve the balance of my time.
At this time,